Have you ever stopped to think, who will be waiting for you on the other side? I'm not talking about the fear of death or anything morbid. I'm talking about reunion. You know that grandmother who used to call you by a nickname only she knew. That hug that felt like it could heal anything. That child who left too soon. Or that father you never got to say goodbye to. Will we ever see those people again? Will we recognize them? Or is heaven just a crowd of faceless, memoryless souls wandering around? These questions usually come in the quietest moments, when everything is too still. When longing hits and we look up to the sky wondering, do they still think about me? It might seem like mere curiosity, but it's not. It's pain, it's hope, it's love that hasn't ended. And as mysterious as it may sound, the truth is, the Bible doesn't ignore this subject. In fact, it speaks of reunions, of names, of bonds that continue even after the end. So stay with me, because today we're going to cross the veil of doubt and see what God truly revealed about family in heaven. When someone loses a family member, the heart feels crushed from the inside. Words disappear, hugs don't seem to be enough. But the Bible, with the tenderness of a father who understands his children's pain, offers more than comfort. It offers a promise. In 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18, Paul reminds us that Christian grief is different. It's not an ending, it's a comma, because eternity changes everything. Knowing that death doesn't have the final word changes even the way we look at a casket. Imagine a mother who lost her young son after a hard battle with cancer. What keeps her going isn't habit or time. It's the certainty that, in Jesus, pain has an expiration date. This eschatological hope isn't just a nice thought, it's a foundation. It allows us to remember with tears, yes, but with direction. It lets us move forward without forgetting, but without drowning in sorrow. It's the kind of pain that points upward, not toward the abyss. And this certainty needs to be more present in our daily lives, because loss can come in a hospital, in a late-night phone call, or even in a silent breakfast. But if the heart is grounded in eternity, grief becomes waiting, an active waiting that prays, that loves, that keeps living with purpose. And that's where a deeper secret begins to unfold. Some people think that in heaven we become some sort of floating soul, no face, no name, no memory. But the Bible shows the opposite. The identity we carry here, our features, our scars, even our laughter, isn't lost in eternity. Jesus, when transfigured before the disciples, was recognized. So were Moses and Elijah. That teaches us that heaven doesn't erase who we are, it glorifies us, and that changes everything. Think of a grandmother who used to call her grandson, "my little sunshine bundle," since he was a baby. That nickname was just theirs. In heaven, that memory doesn't vanish. It's redeemed, purified by glory. The idea that we will keep our consciousness, our ability to recognize each other, and even have healthy relationships with those we loved, brings us even closer to the beauty of eternity. It's not a restart, it's a continuation in its most perfect form. And it's interesting how, even here on earth, we cling to the little details that shape our identity. A saved note, a family quirk, a phrase only the family understands. None of that will be discarded up there. On the contrary, in Jesus, all of it will be redeemed. The promise is that we will be like him, but still ourselves. And this revelation starts shedding light on the decisions we make right now. When someone truly understands what heaven is, they don't live the same way anymore. The vision of eternity begins to change, even the small things. The way we forgive, the way we respond to chaos, even how we spend our time. The Bible calls us to set our minds on things above, Colossians 3:1-4. And that's not poetry, it's a way of life. Jesus taught that where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. So, where's yours? Imagine two brothers who haven't spoken in years over a petty fight. When one of them understands that God's family is eternal, the grudge loses its grip. Forgiveness stops feeling like humiliation and starts feeling like preparation, a rehearsal for what will live together in heaven. Because, in light of eternity, holding a grudge is like hoarding trash in a palace. And sometimes, forgiving is the greatest testimony someone can give. The eternal perspective changes everything. It makes us rethink what's urgent and what's truly important. It takes the weight off certain pains, but adds weight to decisions that once seemed small. It's as if every choice carries an eternal echo. And when we begin to see the now through the lens of heaven, something inside us shifts. And that shift leads to a question most people are afraid to answer honestly. Will we really see our loved ones again in heaven? This simple, direct question has crossed many hearts in silence, especially at funerals. In those moments, comforting words often sound rehearsed, but deep down, everyone just wants to know one thing. Will I see my father again? My grandmother? My child? Will the family that death tore apart be reunited? This kind of pain stirs the soul. Those who've been through it know, and ready-made phrases won't help if there's no solid truth behind them. The hope the Bible offers goes far beyond emotional comfort. It provides deep spiritual answers. Jesus didn't just talk about heaven, he came from there. He is the bridge between this world and the next, and when someone clings to that, they're not just trying to cope with loss, they're preparing for reunion. And this is the point where the heart starts to beat differently, because the question isn't just whether we'll see them again, but what that reunion will be like. Will we recognize them? Will it be like before? Will we still feel the same love? These are painful questions, but they also point to an answer that can change everything. And that answer, interestingly, isn't found in what the world says. When the topic is heaven and life after death, there's all kinds of things out there. Near-death experience stories, books with supposed visions, emotional movies. But is that really what we need to find real answers? The Bible is clear. Authority over the invisible belongs to God, and He has already revealed enough. Jesus spoke of heaven with certainty, not speculation. That's why, in the midst of so much guesswork, Scripture remains our anchor. Picture a child asking their mother if they'll see their grandfather again in heaven. The safest answer doesn't come from a touching film, but from a verse with a promise. The Bible doesn't stay silent on this. It not only shows that there is continuity after death, it reveals who will be there and why. And when someone places their spiritual family above fleeting emotions, they begin to understand that what is eternal must have an eternal foundation. That's why, as the days go by, we need to know where we stand, what sustains your hope, what shapes your expectation of reunion. The Bible, with all its authority, doesn't leave us in the dark. It shows what many avoid facing, what comes after death, and one of the most striking passages about this came from the mouth of Christ himself. Many people think that after death, everything just fades to black. But Jesus told a story that completely changes that idea. In Luke 16, he speaks about the rich man and Lazarus, and it's clear. Even after death, there was memory, awareness, emotions. The rich man could recognize, remember, feel pain. Lazarus was at peace. This shows that consciousness continues, and that's both frightening and comforting. Imagine someone who lived their entire life ignoring eternity, thinking that everything ends when they die. Now picture that same person opening their eyes and realizing they're still themselves, still remembering their family, still carrying their choices. That's why the Bible insists on preparing us while there's still time. Death doesn't erase a person. It only changes the place where they continue to exist. This detail changes how we live today, because if consciousness remains, then everything we do now echoes in eternity. Every choice, every relationship, every step doesn't just disappear. It's as if life here is a rehearsal for something much greater. And when the stage changes, the character remains the same. And the destination of that character depends on a decision that can only be made on this side of the story. The Bible leaves no room for doubt when it says that, upon closing our eyes here, the believer opens them there in the presence of Jesus. In 2 Corinthians 5:8, Paul declares with conviction, "We would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord." That means there's no waiting, no purgatory, no soul sleep. The believer who departs meets the Redeemer. It's immediate. It's personal, and that even changes how we face the fear of death. Imagine an elderly person who lived out their faith in simplicity. They never preached on big stages, never wrote books, but they prayed daily, loved their family, and followed Jesus closely. At the moment of death, they don't enter a void, they enter an embrace, an eternal embrace. That changes everything. It changes how we deal with grief, with goodbyes, with longing. Knowing that those who died in Christ are alive is freeing, but this promise is not universal. The Bible also speaks of the other side. Those who rejected Jesus do not enter his presence, but await judgment. It's harsh, but it's just. And that's why the gospel must be urgent, because knowing that eternity begins in the blink of an eye should make us run, not to live in fear, but to live with purpose. And it's exactly that sense of urgency that leads us to an even deeper revelation. Many people think eternity is just some spirit floating in the air. But the Bible speaks of something much more concrete, the resurrection of the body. When Jesus returns, those who died in Christ will rise, not as ghosts, but with glorified bodies. A body that doesn't feel pain, doesn't age, doesn't die anymore. A body prepared to live eternity with purpose and fullness. Imagine someone who spent their whole life battling illness, pain, limitations, surgeries, and suddenly, at the sound of the final trumpet, that body rises transformed. This is not a fairy tale, it's a promise from God. Just as Jesus rose and ate fish with his disciples, we too will have a real but glorious body. And that reminds us that God's plan isn't just to save souls, but to redeem all of creation. That detail gives meaning even to our current suffering. Because today's pain is not the end, it's the beginning of something greater. Heaven won't be a reset from scratch, but the continuation of the story, with everything restored. And when that new body comes, it brings something even more amazing with it, the reunion with those we love, and the certainty that, finally, nothing else will ever separate us. The question that echoes in the heart of every believer is simple, but full of emotion. Will I recognize my family in heaven? And the answer, according to the Bible, is a big yes. When Jesus rose again, he was recognized by the disciples. When he appeared glorified on the mountain, Moses and Elijah were identified even centuries later. This shows that identity, bonds, memories, all of it remains just redeemed. Picture a mother who lost her young child. She lives with that photo on the shelf, that voice in her memory, and she wonders, will he recognize me? Will I still be mom up there? The Bible doesn't promise that our relationships will be exactly like they are here, but it assures us there will be recognition, that we will still be ourselves, with our stories, our affections, our reunions. Only now, without pain, without separation, without time running out. It's comforting to know that the longing we feel today is not in vain. That the faces who marked our journey, grandparents, children, friends, haven't disappeared. In Jesus, They are still alive, waiting for the great reunion. But that reunion also comes with a new way of relating. Something deeper, purer, more perfect. Something we may not even be able to fully imagine yet. One of the most intriguing statements of Jesus is when he says that in heaven there will be no marriage as we know it here, Matthew 22:30. This doesn't mean the end of love, but its transformation. The Bible reveals that in eternity, relationships won't be limited by jealousy, ego, or insecurities, but will be based on perfect spiritual unity. We will all be one single family in God, one body, one people, one communion. Imagine a couple who lived together for 50 years, built a beautiful story, cried and laughed side by side. In heaven, they won't lose that connection. It will be expanded. The love that was faithful here will be absorbed into something even deeper, without clinging, without loss, without separation. Intimacy will not be exclusive, but universal, as if every relationship were full of wholeness, free from the scarcity we know today. It may feel strange at first because we're used to loving in limited ways, but in heaven, love will have no walls, no divisions, and that also heals a deep wound, the one caused by broken relationships, unresolved conflicts, and lingering pain, because eternity holds something greater, where forgiveness and communion won't require effort. They'll be our essence. And yet, there's still a wound many don't know how to deal with. Maybe this is the hardest question of all. What if someone in my family is not in heaven? The Bible does not shy away from that pain. It shows us that God is love, but He is also just. Jesus clearly spoke of judgment and of the destiny of those who reject the truth. And that hurts. It hurts to imagine that someone we love could be outside of God's presence for all eternity. But this pain also wakes us up. Think of a daughter who grew up hearing the gospel but chose to live far from it. The parents pray, cry, try to talk, and then the anguish comes. What if nothing changes? The Bible doesn't authorize us to judge anyone's eternal destiny, but it does call us to cry out for salvation while there's still time. That's the weight of true love, the kind of love that doesn't settle. Love that proclaims, that intercedes, that persists because it knows the value of a soul. This awareness should transform our urgency. That's why talking about Jesus should never be a shame. It's hope for the ones we love. It's a bridge to eternity. Because worse than feeling the pain of loss is knowing we stayed silent when there was still time. And that brings up a powerful kind of joy, a joy that's not just a future promise, but something that already begins to rise within the soul, here and now. Now imagine what it would be like to reunite with every person who loved Jesus, from all eras, languages, and nations, gathered as one single family. The Bible speaks of a countless multitude before the throne, celebrating living in perfect communion, Revelation 7:9-10. It's a never-ending celebration, a home where no one leaves anymore, where love no longer needs protection, because everything is healed. This isn't just relief, it's a joy that explodes from within. Think of that childhood friend who introduced you to Jesus, but you never saw again. Or that distant relative you barely knew, but who lived by faith. In heaven, those distances will no longer exist. Eternity brings people closer, integrates, connects. We will all be siblings, not by human blood, but by redemption. And the most astonishing part, all of us, gathered before the one who made it all possible. This is the joy that sustains the heart of a Christian, not just the reunion with the family of earth, but the gathering of the family of heaven, with the heroes of faith, with those who endured, with those who, even in anonymity, lived faithfully. And when this vision enters the soul, we begin to realize that today must be lived differently, knowing that heaven is real, that Jesus is waiting for us, and that the family of faith will be reunited, changes how we live now. We can't keep living as if time were infinite. The Bible calls us to walk with eyes on eternity, but with feet grounded in the present. That means prioritizing what carries eternal weight: reconciliation, forgiveness, service, holiness, everything that, even now, already points to what is to come. Imagine someone who spends their days rushing around, accumulating wealth, solving problems, but can't find time to sit with their child, to pray, to listen to God's voice. Living with heaven in mind is about flipping that logic. It's understanding that simple moments, like an honest conversation or an act of forgiveness, carry eternal value. It's not about being perfect. It's about living with purpose. And if eternity starts now, then today's decisions are not small. Choosing Jesus, restoring broken relationships, reading the Word, sharing the gospel, praying with your family. All of that becomes part of our preparation. And the most beautiful thing is that as we live with our eyes lifted upward, heaven starts to invade earth, within us, around us, in our homes. And this is exactly the vision that sustains us. Now tell me, how would your life look if you started living with your eyes on heaven? If every hug with your family was more than affection, but a seed of eternity? Jesus didn't reveal these truths just to comfort us, but to transform us. Have you been living like someone who truly believes the reunion is real? Have you talked about it with the people you love? Or will you wait for the pain to come, just to remember that there's still time? If this video made you reflect, share it with someone in your family. Sometimes it's just one conversation that's missing to change someone's eternal destiny. And tell me in the comments, do you believe you'll recognize your loved ones in heaven? And what else would you like to know about life after death? Oh, and if this content spoke to your heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and stick around, because we're still going to dive into many things the world prefers to hide, but that the Bible has already revealed.